Hi, thank you for joining us today for the 14th episode of Nima Voices, a virtual interview series. My name is Sherri Kajiwara, and I am the director curator of the museum at the Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Center in Metro Vancouver in British Columbia, Canada, which is located on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam First Nations, whose ancestors have cared for these lands for countless generations. At the Nikkei National Museum, our mission is to honor, preserve, and share Japanese Canadian history and heritage and Japanese culture in Canada. Before we start the program, I'd like to briefly introduce the Discover Nikkei project and Nima Voices series. Discover Nikkei is the Japanese American National Museum's international community-based web project with major funding from the Nippon Foundation, launched in 2005. The site is in 4 languages, English, Japanese, Spanish, and Portuguese, and shares unique Nikkei stories around the world, from throughout the US, Brazil, Japan, Peru, Canada, Argentina, Mexico, and other countries. New stories are published daily on the website. Nima are members of the Discover Nikkei online community, hailing from all over the world. They each bring unique experiences and perspective to the site's rich archive of stories. Nima Voices is an interview series where we uplift our Nima through brief but enlightening interviews. In this 14th episode, I will be talking with Michael Kenji Abe, a Canadian Sansei who is the project manager of Past Wrongs, Future Choices. Discover Nikkei has been sharing articles by Michael since 2016. We will be chatting about his family history, why he decided to shift from writing about his father's family's experiences during the Second World War, living in Japan, and the Past Wrongs, Future Choices, and Landscapes of Injustice projects. That's a lot to cover in the next 30 minutes, but we'll try to get through it all. After my conversation with Michael, I will ask him some of your questions, so please use the chat feature to ask questions at any time, and we'll get to them at the end of the conversation. You will need to be logged on to use the chat feature, and we will also be sharing links that we talk about in the chat. Okay, Michael, hi.
Hi,
Tell,
Sherri.
tell us briefly, we're going to dive into your background and family
Okay,
history.
okay.
Tell us briefly about your family background, your where you were born, where you grew up, perhaps a bit about your grandparents and where they immigrated from, and whatever else you would like to tell us about your background.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Sherri. We've known each other since the beginning of landscapes, what, 8 years, 9 years
Mhm.
now. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm here in Victoria, British Columbia, the Lekwungen speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt people. So um, I want to just acknowledge that. And yeah, my name is Michael Abe, and I'm a third generation, a Sansei, and I'm here in Victoria, but I didn't grow up here. I've only been here since 1993. I came. I was born in Hamilton, Ontario, and raised in Burlington nearby, and uh, and I guess that's because of the dispersal of the Japanese Canadians. But my my both my grandparents are from Japan, or from Kyushu. My father's side is from Beppu, Oitaken, and he went to Port Alberni on Vancouver Island. And my mother's side, the Toyota side, they came from Fukuoka, Kurume, and they went to a small town and a community called Paldi, just near Duncan on Vancouver Island here. It's about an hour north of where I am. Although if you were to go there, there is actually nothing there anymore because just a Sikh temple. But really interesting history there, and we'll maybe get to that after. So yeah, so that's kind of just my background. And any further questions there?
That's great. Fun fact, I'm from Kyushu also, originally. But when your family came, of course, there was the Second World War experience. And was your family interned, and where? And did how did you come to learn about the experience?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I grew up in Ontario, and very white community, very few Asians in my school, only one other Japanese Canadian family. So I grew up very much part of the community. Like just I don't think I didn't realize I was white until I wasn't white until I was like 13, and that was in grade 8. And we had to do a school project. Everyone had to interview a parent or a grandparent and learn about their history. And so for this project, I interviewed my dad. I asked to interview my dad, and he would not talk about it. He said, no, I don't want to. I don't want to talk about it." So finally, I convinced him that I got to get a mark. So um, you're gonna have to interview. And he said, "Okay, I'll just tell you the story, and then you have to do the interview yourself because we were supposed to use a tape recorder, yeah, and put it on cassettes back then." And so he did that, and this was the very first time I ever heard about the history of what he went through as a child, my mother went through as a child, and my grandparents went through the Issei. And so I'm 13 years old, and I'm just learning this for the first time. And so it got me really curious. When I did my report for the school at school, none of my classmates and no one knew anything about the internment. And so it was sort of my mission to learn more about it, to talk to my grandmother, and that's why uh, I wanted to go to Japan and learn how to speak Japanese and ask her all these questions because uh, growing up in the 70s in Ontario, uh, three of my grandparents had passed away in the 60s when I was a child, but I had a grandmother, Grandma Abe, who was she was she was long lived. She passed away in 2007 at the age of 99, and I was very close to her. But so she was her family, my dad's family, came from Kyushu, and they went to Port Alberni, and they worked in logging, the forestry industry. There was quite a few Japanese Canadians in the area, so they had a really close knit community there, working, staying in the bunkhouses. My grandmother would do sewing and mending and laundry for the men who were working in the shops. I mean, in the logging camps, in the sawmill. And then when the war came, they went to Lemon Creek, which is one of the internment camps in the Slocan connector area. And then after that, they went out to the Hamilton area. So my mother's side, the Toyota family, there was a very large family. She was 13th child of 14, and they, as I mentioned, they were in Paldy, and then after Paldy, they went to Popoff and then to Denver. And the other Toyota family, there was a brother, two brothers that lived beside each other in Paldy. They had 11 kids. They went to Slocan. So in between New Denver and Slocan and Popoff first, when there was just the tents, and then they went to New Denver. Between those two camps, we had quite a few people, quite a few Toyota members. The older brothers and my grandfather Shoshichi Toyota, they had to go to the logging camps, the road camps, and help build the Hope Princeton Highway. But after the war, they went out to the southern Ontario as well, to Kitchener area, and then eventually to Hamilton. Yeah, so that's kind of briefly the
Yeah.
migration. So that's why I and my family, my siblings, we were all born in Ontario.
What you just described covers a broad scope of the internment era experience, with the forced removal from the West Coast, the internment camps all throughout BC, and also that fact that you mentioned some of your family went to the road camps, and really sort of able-bodied men over the age of 16 were separated from their families and put into work camps, road camps, and that's and also there were
My grandfather Abe, actually, I didn't mention that he
yeah.
went to Angler. He was one of the first to go
Ah,
to Angler. A number
uh,
of them from Port Alberni went directly to Angler,
okay.
and he ended up coming back earlier than everyone else, and he joined the family in Lemon Creek. My grandfather Shoshichi, he was working on he had almost aged out. He was almost 45, but he had a condition. He had bronchitis, so he was able to leave the road camp,
The internment camp?
the the yeah, the road gang that was working on the whole
Oh.
Princeton Highway, and returned with the family in New Denver. Yeah.
Was the move to Ontario part of the second?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely,
Okay. So
yeah.
this is one thing that was unique in Canada as opposed to the United States, where even though the war ended in 1945, in Canada, the internment and the dispossession continued long after that. And in 1946, folks had to make the decision to move further east of the Rockies or to basically be deported to Japan. And that's kind of an unknown part or little known part of our internment era also.
And something I just learned within this year was we've been doing some research for this other project I've been working on, and we were looking at the ledger. There's a repatriation list of 10,000 people who signed up to be quote unquote repatriated, but basically exiled back to Japan after the war. And my family, the Abe family, was signed up to go. So
Many
they did
families
go.
signed
We'd be doing a different. You'd be interviewing someone differently, I guess.
But it was crazy because when those 10,000 signed up, it was really almost a loyalty questionnaire, which they did have a loyalty question in the United States, but the officials visited people in camps. There was not communication about all of this. And when the exile actually happened, by that time, from what I understand, only just under 4,000 did have to go, of which half were Canadian born. So how can you repatriate? How can you go be sent back to someplace you've never been? Anyways, it's just kind of insane to think about all of that. But it's interesting. It's sad, but it's interesting that your family had experience in a full spectrum of the internment experiences. Just dialing it back to Paldi, though, you wrote a story about making umeboshi from the plums that you picked from a tree in Paldi, and that it was the same tree that your mother had picked when she lived there. Can you tell us about how that came about?
Yeah, so we've been pretty curious about Paldi. My aunts, my mother was 6 years old when she left, and but as I said, she was 13th of 14 children, so she had lots of older siblings. And my aunts, our family's been very close in Ontario, and they had very fond memories of Paldi. It was a community. It was a sawmill town. It was run by Mayo Singh from 1918, and he employed immigrants from India and China and Japan. So they had all these and also Europeans. So they had this very unique community where Duncan and Victoria, there's a fair amount of racism. This little community, it was very I don't know, it was very free of that discrimination. It was like if it was New Year's or Shogatsu, they all did Japanese food and festivals, festivities. If it was Chinese New Year or Jor Malar, they would share in the other people's foods and cultures and festivals. So it was a really unique place. And so, and then when the Japanese Canadians had to leave, it continued as a sawmill, but I think only 8 families returned when they could after 1949. But eventually it closed down. So, like I said, it's just there's nothing there except the Sikh temple. But there's this really interesting map from 1933, and Tom Tamagi, who used to live there, he went in 2000. He took that map and he drew all the families that live there, and he made this 4-page legend, and he had all the little landmarks. He had the water tower and the school and things. So we took this map and we tried to triangulate and find where my grandfather's family, and right beside their family was the Daigoro Toyota family, which as I mentioned, had 10 children at the time. So there's these 2 houses with 25 kids, and where was it? So we were searching around, and then a neighbor came out and he said, what are you looking for? He goes, we'll show the map. He goes, oh, wait, I'll go get Joan Mayo and we'll look for it together. And this is where there used to be the tower and things. So we think we found the place. It was in the middle of the forest because it's all grown in now. And this Wayne Baylor, the neighbor, he said, there used to be these two beautiful plum trees that grew here and blossomed in the spring, but they're in the middle of the forest. So we transplanted them and they're in front of my house. So we went to look at them, and sure enough, there are two plants there, two actually very tall trees, over 30 feet tall. Um, Look very old, but he said they bloom beautifully in the spring. Um, Pink blossoms, but in the summer they get these little tart little plums. And I go, those are, oh yeah, I think we made umeboshi from that. And then the next year, I brought my mother out, and we took her there, and we took her in the middle of the forest, and we said, this is where your house was. And then we went to show her the trees, and she said, yeah, this is my mom used to make umeboshi. And so I continue to go up there every July and pick them and make umeboshi. And we've actually got some cuttings from them. And I have 3 trees in my backyard now growing that they blossom, but they haven't produced any fruit yet. So they're
That's a
getting,
lovely story, and that's pretty
yeah.
magical to get the cuttings from that too.
And at our picnics too, I take the plums, and my aunts would just love reading them. They go, oh, it's very nuts.
I'm going to move on to your work with Landscapes of Injustice
Yes.
and Past Wrongs, Future Choices. Can you tell us a little bit about those projects and your role for each?
All right, we've got how many minutes? Okay, let's
Yeah.
take a whole show, but I'll really briefly. So, Landscapes of Injustice was a 7-year project through the University of Victoria, and we basically uh, we focused on the dispossession of Japanese Canadians during the 1940s, and we had a number of outputs, like the museum exhibits and teacher resources. But one of the ones that I was really gravitated towards was the digital archive, that we were able to capture all the custodian case files, the bird commission files, all the different research documents that we had attained throughout the course of the project. And we put it into this database that made it very easy for people to search. They didn't have to go to Ottawa to the Library Archives Canada anymore. They could just access them. So over the years, near the end of the project, we had a number of online sessions like this, and we're gathering stories from just the community members who are discovering this information for the first time, and just reading about learning just kind of the detail that the government kept on their families, and it kind of it filled in the blanks of stories that they had heard but didn't quite know, or in my case, they had completely filled a gap that this two generations of silence had created. So it was really the 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 database is really helping people learn more about their heritage and their history. And then when we finished that, we went on. Dr. Jordan Stanger Ross, the project director, and we applied for another federal grant through the Social Science Humanities Research Council of Canada, and we were successful to get Past Wrongs, Future Choices. And so it extends beyond the Japanese Canadian story. It talks about the various Nikkei communities throughout the world, and their treatment by their governments during the 1940s. So, like the Japanese Brazilian story, the Japanese Australian story, uh, Japanese American story, and we're also working to explore Peru and Mexico as well. So it's another 7-year project, and so there's been many different aspects of that, but uh, uh, I'd like to focus on continuing on in working with our local communities and the different archives in the different countries, and what they can learn from the archives and the records about their history. Um, Take a breath there, and then there's also a field school component to it, where we bring in students and teachers and museum professionals from throughout our project, and we take them on it's a 2-week intensive course. The 1 week is on the internment sites bus tour that's put on by the Nikkei National Museum, and then they spend a week in course at the University of Victoria, and it's been running. It's 2019, and then it was on hold because of COVID, and it just started back up in 2023. We hope to continue to run that for another 5-6 years. And for me, I've come on as part of to be part of the guiding component, and helping to explore the community members and their stories by going to these actual places of where their family was interned, and the different memories that it evokes, and to try and to provide education to those who don't know about the sites. So
It's a powerful tour
that's
to
a
physically
lot of
visit. Yeah.
a lot of connections there. And one it's one of the things is I'm very much into the education part about not only that internment era, but here on Vancouver Island, where a lot of the communities were before the uprooting. So been doing a lot of education guiding, I guess, leading tours to educate people about what life was like pre-war, how entrenched our community was, and invested in settling here permanently in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump over topics a bit to not just only life before, but your life before. You mentioned in the introduction that you spent time in Japan.
Yes.
So I am curious about why you went to Japan. Well, you did say to learn the language, but did living in Japan shift your sense of identity?
It definitely did, yeah. So I was a bit lost. I was in Canada. Well, not really. I didn't really have an identity. It was, am I Japanese? Am I Canadian? Like, mostly I'm Canadian, but what is this other side? And so I started to embrace things like very culturally. I was really interested in artistic things. So I was doing martial arts. I was doing Aikido, trying to learn the language. And then when I went to Japan, I really immersed myself there. I learned, I continued Aikido. I learned, I just tried to do calligraphy and painting and Iaido, different things. And I really immersed myself in that. And I really like the way they learn or they study. It's very traditional. They don't diverge. It's very like uh, uh, it's very
Focused.
traditional.
Yeah, very traditional.
Yeah.
So you were doing the martial arts and the Shodo and all of that before you went to Japan, but you really
It was only
fine-tuned
only Aikido, I guess.
Oh, Aikido, okay.
I had an interest in art, but I didn't really have. There was no classes or anything to do.
So did you learn your Shodo, your calligraphy in Japan? Because
Yes,
you do
all in Japan.
beautiful Nengajo. I'm the happy recipient of your Nengajo, and you've got one hanging on your wall
Yeah,
behind.
that's the year of the rabbit there. So
This year.
I did that every year, and that's actually the third round. So this is the 25th annual. The third. I started with the rabbit in 1999.
Oh, it's the third round of the rabbit. Okay,
No, it's the third year. It's the third year of the Eto calendar.
right.
And I started it in 99 with the rabbit. So I've just started the third one.
Well, they are really, really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
And you also mentioned that your initial inspiration to go to Japan was to really learn or fine tune your Japanese, which I know you're excellent at now, and you continue to study. And
I continue to study, but it's.
But it also helps that your wife is Japanese, right? And you have 2 children, grown children now.
Yes.
Do you speak Japanese with them, or do they speak?
We've been speaking a fair amount of Japanese in the home. We grew up pretty well in English, though. My my wife would speak Japanese, and my daughter would answer in English. But now she's starting to speak quite a bit of Japanese. My son's always spoke Japanese to her, so he was born in Japan, but he was 2 when he came to Canada. So he's very Canadian, but he's very studious. So he likes languages. So he speaks very well with her. Um, I speak as much as I can, but we watch a lot of TV Japan.
That helps.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're making good time.
Yeah.
So there is in every episode, I understand, of Nima Voices, the guests are asked the same set of rapid fire questions. So here we go.
Okay.
Mike, who is your Nikkei hero?
Oh, I have 2. One's Grandma Abe. She's as I mentioned, she lived to be 99. She's the original great one. And I guess the other one would be Dr. Henry Shimizu, who's
Ah,
who is a retired plastic surgeon from Edmonton, but he lives in Victoria now, and he's the he's the ultimate storyteller, and he's told me so many stories about his life in New Denver and in Prince Rupert before that, but also not only non things not related to internment, just about life and adapting and just his very interesting life he's led. So yeah, he's up there.
he's been an important heritage resource, a living heritage resource for my museum as well. I totally understand that one.
Mhm.
What is your favorite Japanese or Nikkei food?
Maybe tonkatsu
Okay.
on ramen. I don't
How about
know.
chow mein?
One of the
That would be
two.
very Nikkei.
Okay.
What is the Japanese value that has most influenced you?
Okay. So that's why I put this one up here. Wabi sabi. I guess there's 2. One is gambaru, and that comes from my grandmother. She's very per- she persevered, and I really admired that about her. And But this wabi sabi is more when I'm learning all these different things. I do a lot of things, but I don't do any of them well. I've been golfing for my whole
I would
life. I
beg
don't
to
do it
differ.
well. I barely do any of these calligraphy things, but I just enjoy it. And wabi sabi is that enjoy the beauty of imperfection, or um, uh, things are always changing. So even you'll never be where you want to be, but if you think of a year from now, you'll be better than you were last year, and I'm better than I was before. But you're never going to be at that perfection. So I kind of have that, just a little bit of that
That's great.
philosophy.
Last rapid fire question. What do you like most about Discover Nikkei?
I like that they do so many uh, uh, different countries. I learned so many things about uh, the other uh, the the cultures of other countries, their history, their Japanese Canadian, their Nikkei history. So I've been following them for quite a long time, and also they're very receptive to articles, and yeah. So I think that, and I like that might even get your if you put in an article, you might get it translated into other languages, and then you can scoop them off the website. But no, yeah, I really appreciate all they've been doing, and it's quite amazing their networks throughout the world in all the different countries.
Absolutely. I totally
Yeah.
agree with you on that. So I'm not sure if we've got any questions from the viewers. I'm not seeing anything in the comments yet, but
So they've even found stuff about Henry Shimizu. That's awesome.
yeah, they've been busy uploading links
Oh
of
yeah, I see that.
things you've been
Yeah.
talking about. So, okay, here we go. We have a question.
Oh,
How do you think your father felt after he finally relented and opened up about family history for your school interview project?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, he continued to be pretty quiet about it for many years. We did, though, actually, after this was in, I guess I was 13, I would have been in 75, 76. And so in 77, when they had the centennial of the Japanese Canadians, and it started to open up quite a bit. More people started to take a little bit of pride in being Japanese Canadian. And in Hamilton, we started our Japanese cultural center. And so he got our family was very involved, and as I said, Grandma Abe. So in Hamilton, it was as in places where people were uprooted too. There was a lot of these. There was many generations there. So in Hamilton, we had the center, and so we had it started to make a very strong bond, and he started to be with other and other Nisei, and they started to talk a little bit. So he got a little bit more open about it, but really it was in the about 10 years, not even 10, 15 years ago, he went to a conference and he started to hear other people from Lemon Creek talk about their experiences, and he really started to open up. And then my daughter was around 13 and started to ask him questions, and actually my son before that, there was 7 years difference, but the grandchildren started to ask him. So now he started to open up a lot more. We took him out to Port Alberni with his mother, with grandma, and the stories started to come out when you put them in place. They started to tell stories. So it was the slow beginning, but it went throughout his life until he passed away. And but thanks for the question.
And we are actually at time. Just another quick look at the comments. Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, Mike and I could just keep talking. So I will thank you, Michael. We'll talk in the hallway afterwards and continue the conversation. But
okay. Thank you,
thank you to everyone.
Nima Voices for hosting this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you to Discover Nikkei, thank you to Nima Voices. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in to the podcast or will be listening later. And remember to check out Michael's stories from Discover Nikkei, which you can find in the live chat or on the video description later. And
can I ask
any final thoughts?
I have one.
Yes.
I don't usually have a beard. I've just started to grow this beard. It's my playoff beard. It's going to go, I started on October 1st and it's going to go to December 30th. It's because I'm on this little other project. We're working on this monument in Victoria that will have all the names of the Japanese Canadians who are uprooted from coastal BC. And I've got until December to finish curating this list of 25,000 people or 23,000 people. And so I'm going into hibernation and for the next 3 months. So that's why I got the playoff beard going.
That's great work. I just noticed in comments, Andrew Hasegawa was on this call.
Hi.
He's also with PWFC, which I'm also on. Past Wrongs, Future Choices. We have acronyms for everything. PWFC heading up the exhibitions cluster, and we could talk for another hour about that, but we are out of time. So please check out the project, our global partners, and all of the exciting initiatives at pastwrongsfuturechoices.com, our brand new website. And also, there is a full roster of events, activities, exhibits, and programs at my museum at the Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Center. So please take a moment to investigate my website at center.nikkeiplace.org. Although this is Discover Nikkei's final program of 2023, they will have more virtual programs next year. Please check their website regularly, sign up for their email list, or follow them on social media to find out about their next multilingual program in February, future episodes of Nima Voices, and more. And finally, Discover Nikkei would love to hear from you. Contact them at editor@discovernikkei.org. I think there it is. The link is dropping. Well, that's my website. That's just been dropped into live chat. But the Discover Nikkei editor at discovernikkei.org is where you contact them for your stories with your feedback, suggestions for future episodes and programs. They're always really open to ideas. So thanks again. Apologies for running a little bit over time, but it's been a pleasure. And as I say, I could talk with Mike forever. So thanks, Mike, for your time.
I'll see you on Tuesday. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thanks,
very much.
everyone. Good night.
Night.